Wield Fate is about you controlling demigods out on the board. And no one actually knows who is controlling what demigod. I mean, you are controlling all of them, but you are focusing on one in secret that you really want to make it in the finish line, because then you win the game. It will all make sense in just a little bit. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up this pretty game, but also how to play it. So let's have a look at this. We start by putting the city tile in the center of the table. Around the city we should place out these regions, and it's quite important the way we place them. The pools and abyss should be followed by the coast, then the forest, the canyons, the desert, the volcano, and lastly the mountains. We then need to take the demigods and place them out around the city center. The renown markers are placed at the bottom of the abyss. We need to shuffle the city deck looking like this, and then drawing cards until we get to the one called altar. Altar is then placed on the city tile on the spot where it says city. The rest of the deck is placed close to the board. Next we need to separate the age card by, well, age, going from 1 to 3. And then draw one card from each of these decks. And then we create a pile, with 1 on the top, 2 in the middle, and 3 in the bottom. The other cards goes back into the box. And this pile here is placed face down next to the board. Next we need to place out quest cards on the board. Now, depending on how many players you are, you should have different amount of quest cards. These quest cards are then at random placed in each region that has a quest spot. We put them face up on these spots. Next we need to at random select a demigod. We need to split these demigods up into 2 decks, and there should be 1 color of each in each of these decks, meaning no duplicate in each deck. Then we take one of these decks and shuffle them. The other one goes back into the box. Players then in secret takes 1 card and looks at it, and then we keep this card face down in front of you. Players may not reveal this card to any other player until the game is over. The color on these demigod cards matches one of the figures out on the board. Next we need to decide who becomes the first player, and this is of course done by fate. We need to have an amount of scorpion fate cards, looking like this, that matches the number of players minus 1, but also 1 feather card, looking like this. As you can see, they have the same backside. These 2 cards are then shuffled together, and then we deal out 1 card to each player. Whoever gets the feather becomes the first player. The first player then gets to take the first player token. Now we need to place the fate cards next to the board for easy reach to all players. And each player should draw 5 of these cards to have on their hand at the start of the game. We also need to place the god powers next to the board. So in this game you are controlling one of these demigods during your turn, and during your turn you can make the move or you can play a god power. Now, as you do not know who the other players have as their demigod in front of them, well, you don't really know who you're messing up for or who you're actually doing a favor. But your objective in this game is to get as much renown, meaning these ones down here, as possible for the demigod that you have in front of you. And if you get the most of these renown during the 3 different ages meaning rounds, well then you are the winner of the game. But before we take a look at the gameplay itself, I think that we should take a look at the cards. Let's first take a look at these quests that is out in the different regions. Now, as we can see at the top, there is a name of this quest. And then we have some spots. These spots is where your or someone else's demigod might end up during the game. Each of these quests represents an adventure that the demigods will undertake to prove their worth. and this might increase or decrease their renown in the process. A quest can end in two ways. As you can see here, one side is white and another side is black, meaning that this here can end in two different ways. And they will do that by using these fate cards, either voting for the black side or the white side. Next we have the age cards, and the age cards are kind of like events that will trigger at the end of each age. Now these might have quite big impact on the world that your demigods are traveling through. And next we have the city cards. Now these are events that will happen in the city and will affect demigods when they return into the city itself. And lastly we have the fate cards. Now, the fate cards represent the gods' influence in this world. Player will start the game with 5 of these on their hands, and will use them to influence the outcome of quest, but also age cards, either to vote for feathers or scorpion results. Fate cards are also used to accomplish god powers. Now, these powers here are powers that your demigods will be able to do. And as you can see, some of them will cost you fate. So now we've done the setup, we know what the card means, and it's time for us to take a look at the gameplay. During a player's turn, you can do 2 actions. You can choose to move a demigod, or you can do a god power. Or you can do both, or just do one. It's all up to you. You can choose to move and then do a god power, or do a god power and then move, or move twice, and so on. But the first thing the first player should do in the start of each age is to read the top age cards. Now remember these cards, these are the ones that might affect the game in different ways. Once we have read this card, we place it face up in the center of the table. So once we have drawn the age card, we are ready to do our turn and take our 2 actions. Now the first thing we're gonna look at is to move the demigods around. And remember, you don't only need to move your demigod, no, you can move any demigod out on the board. And the less obvious you are, the better it is, because you do not want the other players to figure out what demigod you have. But let's take a look at movement. You can choose to teleport, which means that you get to move one demigod from one quest to one spot on another quest, and ignoring all of the movement rules. You can choose to move one step to an adjacent region or the city, simply by taking the demigod and moving it one step. Whenever a demigod is moved into the city, we need to activate the city card, putting the city token on the first spot. Every time a new demigod moves into the city, or the same one coming back to the city, we need to move this one step, and then do whatever it says on that spot. Once we reach the last space, we need to bring in a new city card into the city, and the old one is discarded. You can move from the abyss into the pools, or from the pools into the city, but you cannot move from the city into the pools. Neither can you move from the coast or the mountains into the pool or the abbey, as they are not considered to be adjacent to these spots. But you can move from the coast over to the mountains if you want to do that, as the coast and the mountains are considered to be adjacent. Or you can choose to move a demigod to an open spot on a quest card in an adjacent region. So what happens when you put a demigod onto a spot of a quest? Well, first you need to make sure that there's no requirements for you to place it there. And if there is a requirement, you of course need to be able to fulfill that requirement to be able to place your demigod. Like this one here, for example. Here, only specific class, meaning specific demigods, can be placed. And on this one here, only the pink demigod can be placed, and no one else. If there is nothing in the place where you want to place your demigod, well then there is no requirements. The player that places the demigod on the quest now need to place a vote card from their hand on the spot next to that quest to vote if they should either go to the white or the dark side on the quest. Some of these Fate cards only have one symbol, meaning that they only count as one vote. Some of them has two, meaning that they count as 2 votes. But some of them looks like this, and this means that they add 2 random Fate cards from the Fate deck as a vote. Once all of the spots on a quest card is completely filled with demigods, we need to resolve that card. All of these Fate cards has a symbol at the top center. These icons represent the number of extra cards that must be added when resolving this quest. The active player who finished the quest must choose a player or players to add another Fate card to the vote pile. Once all of the cards has been added, it's time for us to reveal the deck and put one card face up at a time. If we ever get the +2 cards, then we should draw 2 random cards from the Fate deck and then add that in. Once we have shown all the cards, well then we know the result of that quest. And then we need to resolve the quest depending on if it came on the white side or on the black side. If there should be a tie in this card, meaning that we get the same amount of feathers as we got scorpions, well then we should flip this cool little coin here. And that one will tell us which side that actually won. Depending on what we voted for and which side won, different things will of course happen. The skytte symbols means that we lose renown. If there's no number, we lose 1. If there's a 2, well then we lose 2. The omega symbols means that we will gain renown. If there's no number, we gain 1. If there's a 2, well then we gain 2. If we get the coin, well then we need to flip the Fate coin. And if we get the white side, well then we do whatever the white side says. If we get the black side, well then we do whatever the black side says. In this case here, we get smite. But then, how do you score renown? Well, you complete a quest, of course, and when you gain renown, well then you move either up, or if you lose renown, well you will move down. In this case here, the purple one is closest to the next renown, because they are first in line, meaning that the purple one is in the lead. While the red one here has gained 1 renown because they completed a quest, meaning that they will actually move into the front of the row. But if Bellan here, the green one, loses 1 renown, well then that one will actually go down 1 and back 1 step. You may not move a demigod that is on a quest spot. These demigods are now locked in this space and cannot be moved. And that is how you move, which is quite simple, right? I mean, you can move 1 step with 1 figure, or you can move 2 steps if you choose to use both actions to move. The second action you can choose to do during your turn is to play a god power. So to be able to do these god powers, you need to be able to pay whatever cost that power says. For example, to do portal, you need to pay 3 Fate cards. But to do smite, you only need to pay 2, and influence, you only need to pay 1 of these cards. Of course, if you cannot pay the amount stated, well then you cannot do the action. But what does these actions mean? Portal will let you move 1 demigod to any location on an open spot on a quest, and ignore all movement rules or quest requirements. Next we have transfiguration, which will let you switch place on 2 demigods on the same quest card. Next we have smite, which will let you take a demigod and put them down in the abyss. If you choose to do smite, you should move the demigod's figure that you just sent to the abyss to the back of its renown space, where it's at the moment. If you choose Ominence, you can choose to take 1 card and shuffle it into a voting pile. But you also get to look at that pile. Lastly, we have influence. Here you get to add 1 Fate card to a quest, and then add additional 1 from your hand. And that is how a player's turn goes on. You do 1 or 2 actions, and then the turn goes on to the player on your left. Now, if you choose to do your 2 full actions, the turn will go on as if nothing happened. If you choose to do one action, the turn will also go on and come back to you again, and you can do 2 more turns. But if you choose to do nothing during your turn, you are considered to be resting. Meaning that now your turn will be skipped during this age, until the rest of the players does the same thing. The first player to rest during one age, meaning a round, remember, gets to take the first player token. And if no one chooses to rest during an age, well, the first player's token simply stays at the first player. If you run out of fate cards during your turn, you are considered to be resting. Same if you do not get any new fate cards during your turn, you are also considered to be resting. To say it simply, when you cannot do any more actions, well then you are resting. And that's the way one age would go on until all players have rested. Now, when we have rested, we need to resolve the city card, meaning the one in the center. And we will do this going from left to right, doing whatever it says. Now, there are quite a few city cards, so I will let you figure this out by yourself. Once we have done that, we need to reset the board so we can go into a new age. But we also need to draw new fate cards because now we have used the ones we had on our hands, remember? Plus we would need to put out new quests on the board as well. But also a new city card in the center of the city. Once we have done that, well then we are ready to go into the next age. And this is the way the game will go on, either until one player have reached 12 renown, or until we have gone through all the ages. If we go through all the ages, well then the winner with the highest renown, once we expose which demigod we have, is the winner of the game. That, my friend, was Wield Fate. This game is beautiful, it's nicely made. If you like, kind of like hidden movement games, but not really. I mean, this is more like secret movements where you have an agenda because nobody knows who you are. But you don't know who the other players are either. You don't really know if you're messing up for someone and sitting next to you, or maybe no one at all, because that demigod does not need to belong to another player. Well, you should check this game out if you like these types of games. There are so much fun going on here. It's not that hard to learn. There are some symbols, but it gets quite understandable quite fast. So you should check this game out if you want to know more. There are links down in the description. If you like my channel, if you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, maybe subscribe to the channel, I don't know, do whatever you want. But most importantly, my friend, please remember to keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace out.